How we doing? Thank you guys for having me.
Absolutely.
Hey, our pleasure, man. Our pleasure indeed. This is going to be exciting, man.
Yeah. So look, before we jump in, a couple housekeeping items, right? So first, please leave us a rating and review so that we can grow, educate others, right? Second, please subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And third, buckle up as always. It's going to be a hell of a ride.
Oh my gosh. Yes, this is going to be crazy, but it's going to be good. So, Jason, my main man, welcome in. First time on the show. Couple quick questions for you. What got you into real estate? What brought you into real estate? And why do you enjoy real estate so much?
That's a loaded question right there. I'm going to take it one at a time. I could talk to you about 45. I could turn that story into 45 minutes worth of content here. So
I love it.
How I got into real estate, I got to take a step back. I grew up in New Jersey. I went to college in Bethlehem, Lehigh University, which was kind of my introduction to the Lehigh Valley, which is where I invest now. I played baseball there. I didn't know that people invested in real estate. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know that, normal people could be buying houses and renting them out. I didn't know what flipping houses was. Baseball was pretty much my life. I majored in engineering. That was kind of like my backup plan, but I was lucky enough to get drafted to play professionally my junior year. I dropped out of school, got drafted by the Padres, and started playing in the minor leagues. I don't know how much you guys know about minor league baseball, but I was getting paid about $2,000 a month pre-tax. So after taxes, I was getting paid about $1,500 a month for only 6 months a year. You're not making much money as a minor league baseball player. I always tell people minor league baseball players are inherently entrepreneurial just because you're basically betting on yourself to eventually make it big. If you don't perform, you're not going to get paid. And I think business is very similar. If you don't produce any type of results, if you don't provide any value to anybody, you're not actually going to get paid. Although I wasn't making much money, I did get a signing bonus of $50,000, which again, after taxes was about, I think like somewhere between 35 and 40 grand. I also had some money saved up from an internship. So that was my first time I ever really had any money. And I knew I didn't want to blow it. Luckily, I was raised with a good head on my shoulders. Unlike some of my teammates who went out and bought chains or a BMW. I decided it's like, I'm going to invest this money, but I didn't know what the hell that meant. Like any high school, college kid, you ask them about investing, they're probably going to just say, I don't know, like a 401k or a Roth IRA, because I don't come from a family with a business background. My dad was an engineer. My mom works in insurance. So that was pretty much all I knew about investing, but I knew I wanted to learn more. Started going heavy down that route of just like looking into forms of investing. Eventually somehow came across real estate. I don't really remember where. It was probably a podcast, Bigger Pockets or something like that. And that just something inside of me clicked. There was some light bulb. I just knew that real estate, I felt like it was an asset that I could really control more so. Obviously there are swings in the market like any type of investment, but I just felt like I had more control over a real estate investment than I did some, stocks or anything like that. So that is how I got started in real estate. I basically took my signing bonus that I got, put 25% down on a 2-unit in Allentown, and then the rest is history.
That's awesome. It's amazing that you had a good head on your shoulders, like you said, because I feel like just, 90% of the population, if not more, would go and just like you said, blow it. And not only did you invest it, you invested in debatably the best asset class there is. So that's amazing. It's funny because I just saw Jason speak at a local meetup the other night, and every time I hear his story, I learn a little bit more. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But I know right now you're into building your own portfolio and you do flipping on the side, not the side, but with it, right? Why choose those two things to do versus all the different things in real estate that you could get into?
Yeah. So initially my focus when I got into real estate was just rentals. And the reason was I love playing baseball, and it was just a way for me to invest my money and start, creating passive income, which I don't like that word too much anymore. We can get into that, but
we should.
I wanted to, start creating this passive income on the side. So at first it was just rentals and I was playing baseball, I was doing my thing. And then eventually I went full time into real estate when I retired from baseball. And at that point, for about another 6 months to a year, I tried to continue just focusing on rentals. And basically just recycling the money that we did have through doing burrs. But I realized pretty quickly that wasn't necessarily a sustainable strategy, because if you're going to be, even if you're doing perfect burrs, you're just recycling the money you do have. So if you're paying for marketing, where's that money coming from? And then you have other expenses that come with running a business, right? So where's that money coming from? And then how am I, I could go and raise private money to do those and then use my own money for the marketing. But at some point I just realized like, hey, maybe I should, just flip one of these houses instead of doing a burr on it. And one thing led to another. I think I realized at the closing table, getting a check and being like, wow, this is actually going into my bank account rather than just like being equity in a rental. And then having that money to reinvest into marketing. A light bulb again went off. So now I think of it as like two completely separate businesses. And I'm even trying to now think more of it as one business and one investment, right? So I'm thinking of flipping as my business where I actually make money. And then although I still am self-managing my rental portfolio, I'm trying to create that turn that into as much of an investment rather than a business. Although again, it's very much still not passive. I'd like to get it there eventually.
Brilliant.
Oh, dude, I love that. And I love the air quotes. All three of them air quotes, passive, right?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Yeah. So amazing story thus far. I want to dive in a little bit deeper. Went from doing burr, realizing that it wasn't sustainable, needed to figure out something a little bit different, created two different paths that you're controlling. What are some of the life lessons that you learned in there, some of the issues that may have caused, and how did you overcome that? I don't know if you can sort of touch a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think I really touched on the biggest lesson that I think I learned already, which was just like, if you're going to be a full-time real estate investor, if you're starting from scratch, it's really tough. Like, and I was living relatively frugally, right? It's still tough to grow a business without some type of active income. It's hard to grow a portfolio without some source of active income. And whether that comes from flipping or maybe for you guys on the syndication side, right? You have your syndication fees or whatever that pay for the overhead of your business. You really need something to supplement the passive, again, I'll use air quotes, the passive side of your portfolio. You need something that's going to be generating the capital that you can use for the overhead to grow that business.
Love it. Just to dive in a little bit deeper, is there any particular property that comes to mind when you're thinking of something that may have went wrong that you want to share about?
Yeah, I mean, there was one 3-unit property.
Tell me about it.
Yeah, that we had bought, and it was just, I mean, it's not like a horror story, but it's just your typical burr gone wrong, where we went, I think it was like 25,000 over on the renovation budget. It was already we were planning on spending 50 on it. I think we ended up spending about 70. So we went about 20 over on the renovation budget, because we ended up having to replace a bunch of windows that were surrounding a fire escape with fire rated windows, which are not cheap. So lots of unexpected expenses. And then the appraisal came in a little bit low. So we ended up leaving a good chunk of our money in the deal that wasn't really expected. So not a horror story by any stretch, because it's still a good property that's cash flowing, but it just made me realize, luckily we had the cash to leave in the deal, and I didn't have like 8 other deals going on at that time. It was still when we were kind of getting started. So I was able to kind of cut my teeth, learn my lesson there, and then take that and move forward with it.
Nice. So you mentioned with your portfolio, you try to do burrs, which is awesome, and everyone should have a grip on that. With your flips, what kind of financing do you normally do? Do you get like a rehab loan or something like that?
Yeah. So for the most part, it's basically a combination of hard and private money. We've done a couple with just private money, which I think is kind of the way that I'll be going moving forward as I get more access to private money, right? But at the beginning, it was hard money. They would fund 90% of the purchase and 100% of the renovation. And then I would basically just pay that 10% down payment, any closing costs and the interest. But now what I'm doing, if it's not 100% funded by private money, purchase price and renovation, I am still using the hard money lender. And then I'm basically raising money in second position from a private lender and basically using that as gap funding.
Brilliant.
Don't get me wrong. I am definitely guilty of using my own money in our flips, but that's a lesson that I've learned the hard way recently. Was we had a flip that we bought for 30,000 and we knew we had to put at least 40 into it. We knew our all in was going to be around 70, and I'm a jackass. So there was an investor who wanted to work with me and wanted to get in on a project, and he only had 50,000 available to lend. So I was like, okay, yeah, it's fine. I'll just contribute 20,000 of my own money. And that project is almost done now, but we have this other flip that we ended up going over budget on. So now I'm putting my own reserves in that deal as well. And we're a little bit cash strapped just because I'm putting my own money into all these flips. So a lesson that I've definitely learned in the past few months is in my flipping business, the one non-negotiable I'm going to have for myself moving forward is I'm never going to underraise, because it's just too much risk for me to be putting my reserves into all these deals and just kind of floating them until they sell. So I'm definitely going to be, if anything, more conservative and over raising to an extent, maybe 10% extra on the renovation budget or whatever, just to make sure that I can keep my cash in reserves in case of an actual reason that I would need those reserves.
That is such a good lesson. And I feel like anybody should go back and re-listen to that whole thing, because that is so important. And I'm guilty of it too, right? Like under raising is such a overlooked yet critical failure to something, because it's you using, just like you said, your reserves, and then that gets you in a tight spot, and then it takes one more little thing to just topple the whole empire.
Man. And you run out of you run out of money, you run out of business. So
right. So I think it's an awesome lesson. One other thing I want you to touch on too, because I love how you explain it, is you're a big fan of profit first. And so go into how you structure your real estate business, because I feel like a lot of people don't talk about that, and it's so valuable.
Yes. So I'll give a very high level overview first for anybody who hasn't heard of Profit First.
Nate, do you know Profit First?
I'm not familiar with the term. I am here to learn. All
right. Sweet. All right. Listen up then. So Profit First is basically a sophisticated version of like the envelope method. If you've ever heard of people who take, let's say they make $5,000 a month just at like a job, they would take that, put it in $5,000 in cash, and they would put $1,000 for rent in an envelope. They'd put $500 for groceries in an envelope, whatever. I'm just using random numbers here, but it's basically that, but instead of envelopes, it's bank accounts for your business. So the example I like to use is a rental business. Let's say you have a portfolio of like 20 units or something like that. You would have a separate account for all of the money to go into, and then you would have separate accounts for other aspects of your business. So you would have like a PITI account for your mortgage. You would have an operating account for like utilities, insurance expenses. Insurance would be in PITI, but utilities and other like monthly expenses, overhead, employees, stuff like that. You would have, maybe you can go several layers deeper. You can have a maintenance and CapEx account, a reserve account, charity. But the main three foundational accounts for Profit First are a profit account, which you would take a distribution from once a quarter, or at least that's what I do. You take a distribution once a quarter, and that's like your bonus for running the company. Owner's comp, which is where you would pay your weekly or monthly salary, biweekly, whatever you want to do. And then owner's tax, which is where you basically take a percentage of revenue and you just put it in that account. That way you can, there are no surprises in April. If anything, you're overfunding that account, and then you can just take a bonus whenever you're paying your taxes. The way I like to explain it, once you have an idea of the foundational accounts, is let's say you have that rental portfolio of 20 units, just for simplicity's sake. Let's say each month let's say your rent roll is $20,000. Every month, right, theoretically, $20,000 is going to go into that income account. And then the first thing you do is let's say your PITI on all of those properties, again, just keep it simple, is $10,000. The first thing you do is transfer 10 of that $20,000 to the PITI account. That way the mortgages are paid. And then in profit first terms, the 10,000 that's left over would be called your real revenue. And then the real revenue is what you divide out by percentages into all of your other accounts. So let's say you're allocating 10% to profit, 10% to your owner's tax, 20% to owner's comp, and then just keep it super simple, 60% to operating expenses. You could break that out way further into like maintenance, vacancy, et cetera, whatever accounts are specific for your business. And it doesn't have to be real estate. It could even be, if you're in a different industry, it would be a completely different calculation. But I'm just talking about real estate specifically. Of that real revenue, the $10,000 you have, 10%, aka $1,000 would go into the profit account. 10%, $1,000 would go into the owner's tax. What did I say? 20% for owner's comp, $2,000 would go into that account. And then $6,000, 60% would go into the operating account. And then basically that owner's comp account goes into you transfer that into your personal checking. That's your salary for the month. And then owner's tax and profit just kind of sit there and build up until you need them. But it's definitely, I probably should have led with this story, but the reason I came across profit first and the reason it like the light bulb went off again for me was I used to just have one bank account, one operating account. I think I might've had a reserve checking account or whatever, but I had one bank account. And once I started doing like more than one project at a time, it was like all the money, like, and especially if I was using a hard money lender, like all the money is just in one account. And sometimes there's 60 grand in there and sometimes there's 50 cents in there. And it's just like, you never know, like, you never really know what money is allocated for what. So once I realized like, oh, and another account that I have is the OPM account, right? The other people's money account. So now if I'm raising money, like I said, from a private investor in second position, that money is going directly into that account. And I know exactly what property it's for. You can even create separate properties for separate accounts for separate properties. Sorry. If you want to get really that detailed with it.
That's awesome. And I think just one of the big takeaways here too is like anybody can have one property and they're like, well, I don't need that, right? And sure, maybe you don't. But it's when you have a lot of properties and a lot of projects going on and things get messy quickly and you overlook things. And that's a really good way to not overlook stuff. So
yeah, don't get me wrong. There's still ways to make it messy with profit first too, right? Like I was very guilty of I learned about Profit First from, there are two books, Profit First, the original by Mike McAllowicz, I think his last name is, and then Profit First for Real Estate Investors by David Richter. I read both of those books and I was like, oh my God, this is genius. I got to implement this. So I just went and implemented it. I think I finished both books. I probably started implementing it while I was reading it. And then I just kind of set it and forget it and tried to make it work for about a year. But I was not doing it the right way. Like I would rob money from my owner's tax account if I was short on cash, or like the profit account. I'd just be like, oh, I'll just put it back later, right? I recently reread the book about maybe 3 or 6 months ago and just realized all the mistakes I've been making. So you can definitely still be messy with Profit First. It's not like a foolproof strategy. But it's a step in the right direction to start managing your finances more like a business, less like your personal finances, I guess.
I think it is so important to understand for anybody that's out there that's listening. So many nuggets were just dropped. One being implement the system before it's too late. You don't want all of your money in there with 60,000 or 50 cents. It doesn't seem like that's going to, it's too much headache. It's too much going on. And the way that you were able to not only understand it, but then go back and continue to learn and dive back into it, picking up the book again and again to be able to see what parts or what pieces might not have fit in the puzzle the proper way to be able to then further yourself in your education, your growth, the development of your company. Dude, hands down, hats off to you, man. That is phenomenal, bro.
Yeah, both of those books, Profit First. There are certain books, I'm looking over my bookshelf here, but there are certain books that I can just pick up once a year or whatever, and I literally feel like I'm reading a new book each time I read it. And Profit First is definitely one of those books.
Oh, I love it. Now, we talked about 2 different kind of jobs that you got going on, fix and flips. You've also got the burrs. But let's talk a little bit more about the strategies behind the market. How do you choose the market? Are you staying just within your realm where you're at now? Are you branching outside of it? And what kind of trends are you seeing? Fill me in on all that.
Yeah. So, like I said earlier in the show, I invest in the Lehigh Valley, which is basically Allentown, Bethlehem, and Easton, 3 smaller cities, like an hour north of Philly, roughly an hour west of New York City. And I stick to that area pretty much. It's like 30 minutes wide from Allentown to Easton. So it's not a very large area, but it's big enough for the size of my business right now. It's more than enough. I will, like, through our marketing, I'll come across the occasional deal outside of that. And typically that's when I'll just look to wholesale it or something like that. But as far as rentals and flips, I'm just staying in Lehigh and Northampton counties. I'm just sticking to what I know.
Makes sense. Look, before we get into our last segment, there's something I want to touch on that I've been chewing on it since I saw you post it. So you posted this video the other day, and I do not remember the book name, but it was about this concept of taking time for yourself first. And you explained it in a way that you're like, it's like the profit first idea instead of while you pay yourself first, this system, you take time for yourself. And I just want you to touch on that because I watched that like 5 times and I've been chewing on it for the last week, just going.
Yeah. So the book is called 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Burkeman, and it's a good book. It's a deep book. It's not your light read, to start your morning off with maybe. But I actually read that book. Something that I just started implementing is like a quarterly retreat where, like, it's just me. I rented a cabin in Tennessee. I was just there for a couple of days, shut my phone off, threw it in the closet, and just read, did our like quarterly planning with goals for the business and stuff like that. It was a cool experience. And that was the book I chose to read, which, I mean, it was a good time to read that book. But the main takeaway that I got from that book is, and the point that I was making in that video that Cole is referring to, is entrepreneurs and business owners tend to have this mindset where they just need to get their business to a certain point, and then they can go and do these, other things that they want to be doing. And I just realized by reading this book that once let's say an easy way for me to explain it is with rentals, right? When I first got into real estate, I set my goal for 15 units. It was like, okay, once I'm at 15 units, I'll be financially free, and then I can do whatever I want to do. And I got to 15 units. It was like, shit, I can't do much for 15 units. I need 25. So then we're not at 25 yet, but if we got to 25, eventually I'd just be like, no, let's get to 50, right? I would never eventually reach that point where I'm like, let's just let off the gas pedal. We're good, right? And you can even dial that back a little bit to even just like projects that you're working on. You're like, no, I just need to finish this project. I'm just going to grind it out for the next 2-3 weeks. And then I'll take some time and I'll, go on vacation, do whatever you feel like doing. It doesn't have to be that grandiose, but so yeah, I basically said it's similar to profit first. Like if you don't start taking the time to have a little bit of whatever you want to call it, work-life balance, and try to not use that word for it. But if you don't take the time to do those things now, it's only going to get harder as your business grows, right? It's a habit, just like profit first. If you don't pay yourself now, it's only going to get harder in the future, right? Your business is going to grow it's going to grow in revenue, but it's also going to grow in expenses. And it's never going to be easier to cut those expenses than it is now. Similar to your time, it's never going to be easier to take the time to, optimize your life for whatever you want to spend your time doing than it is now.
Love that.
Wow, that's deep. Holy cow. I love it.
I jumped around a little bit there. I don't think I articulated it as well as the video, but
no, makes sense. I get it. I think it's super valuable.
Thank you for sharing that. I found value in it, and I'm hoping those that are out there watching it also can understand what's going on here.
Cool.
Extremely important. Went through all of our questions. We're jumping into what others like to call lightning round, speed round, fire round, whatever. We call it POV, your point of view. We want to get your point of view on some things, all right? Okay. So if you're cool with this, we are going to throw like 5, maybe 6 questions at you, back to back to back to back. Don't think about it, just answer.
Cool. Are these short answers, or can I ramble a little bit?
You can ramble if you would like to. That's just fine.
All right. I'm a rambler, so I might do that on you.
I like how we ask him if it's all right, but we're gonna do it either way.
Yeah.
All right,
hit me with it.
All right. So the first question, what separates the top performing investors from the rest? I never said they were going to be easy questions.
Yeah, I'd like to mull on that one for a little bit, but I think just because we're talking about it, I would say people who treat their business as owners, and they really spend time, working on their business and tracking the KPIs, whatever you want to call it. And, they're more at they find a way to get themselves to the 300-foot view of their business on a more consistent basis. And they're able to step back and look at what's working, what isn't working, and make the necessary pivots, rather than the person who's just always the operator or whatever you want to call it. And they get so stuck in the day-to-day. Like, for a perfect example of this, I think would be the contractor who is just like always, they're always putting the floor in, but they never get to the point where they're able to hire somebody else to do that work for them. That way they can actually grow the business.
Love that. I think we need some Jeopardy music in between these questions too. Like when we ask some background Jeopardy music going. All right, give us a daily habit.
I got you.
Perfect. Give us a daily habit that contributes to your success.
That's a tough one for me, because I used to have you guys heard of the book Miracle Morning? So I've done all of that, and I like meditation and stuff. Don't get me wrong, they're all great, but my most recent habit, I'm a morning person. Even before I read that book, I've always just been naturally, I cold nose this. I go to sleep early and I wake up early. That's how I roll.
Sleep at 7, wakes up at 4.
Yeah, well, not that extreme, but that's what I do. But my most recent habit, my morning routine is I wake up and
it's time to go.
Yeah, well, that's not true. The one thing I still do in the morning is I'll write a little bit. But that's just to wake me up pretty much. And then I get going.
Awesome. I love it. What's a piece of advice that you would give yourself if you were to start over again?
That's not you. These are good questions, man. I don't know. It's tough because I would probably tell myself, I was really stubborn at first, holding as rent, like burring everything, keeping everything we can. Why would I sell something when I could keep it as a free rental? That's going to be the better decision when you look at it over a 50-year time horizon. On a single property basis, you're going to be better holding that property than you would be to sell it, right? But I was looking at everything property by property and not actually looking at my business as a whole, and realizing that I was holding myself back, focusing solely on burrs, because at that time, I didn't have the track record to be raising money, and I only had so much money, right? And instead of keeping that first property as a rental, if I flipped it, right, I would have had significantly more money to work with that I then could have maybe done a few burrs. I think it would have been easier to scale my business quicker if I had been open to actually making money instead of just keeping everything and, never actually having any liquidation events.
I love that point. And just to reinforce this, I have this argument with people all the time, because we do a lot of the wholesale side, and they're always like, well, if you get a good deal, why don't you just keep it? You should, just like you said, hold everything. And there's something to be said for that. I definitely agree. Yeah. However, the active income could debatably be more important, just like you're saying. Like for Nate and I, if we can sell something and then go and reinvest it into like a bigger, better property, just like you're saying, or a couple more transactions that are better, that's a better use of our money than holding every single thing we ever touch. So I love that. What is your favorite business and or real estate book?
I got my bookshelf here, handy dandy. I want to go with Profit First for real estate investing. I'm not going to think about it too much. We've been talking about it. I mean, that is hands down the book that has changed my business the most.
Final question. What's the biggest non-monetary benefit that you've gotten from real estate investing?
Oh, that's easy. So we didn't touch on this at all, but something that I love doing, and Cole heard me talk a little bit at the meetup that I spoke at the other night, is travel hacking with credit card points, which you don't necessarily need to be in real estate or real estate investing specifically to do, but having a business that you spend money in, that you can basically generate credit card points and then use those points to travel for free at a much higher value on those points than if you just got like a cashback credit card or something like that. So it's been a lot of fun structuring some trips and like being able to take my family places that I wouldn't have been able to just with cash. Has been a lot of fun.
Is that how you pulled off the Tennessee trip?
No, actually I paid for that just because
goodness.
That was, well, so first of all, Allentown AB airport flies to Nashville for like $60 round trip. So I was kind of stupid to not. And then also like that's a business trip, so I was able to put it on a business card and write it off. Or like the personal trips is what I use points for.
We could have, and I would honestly love to do this, have a whole episode just on this concept, because there's no way we could even get into it in a few minutes. We need so much time to go into it and how it's beneficial. So if you're right with that, we'll definitely.
Yeah, this will be you can use this as the teaser for the next.
There we go. All right, just lead them in. Give us a couple of trips that you've been on just with your points, and we'll leave it at that.
So I've only done a couple at this point. I'm still newer to it, but the proof of concept, the first trip that we did was me and my girlfriend flew from JFK, which is in New York. We flew from New York to Paris, stayed in Paris for a couple of nights, flew to Rome, Italy, stayed there for a few weeks, and then flew back. The only thing we paid for was the Airbnb in Rome, just because you can't. I think actually you can use points for Airbnb somehow, but it's not a very good redemption value. But the flights were all free, and the hotel in Paris was free. Not free, but we used points for it. And then after that, me and my girlfriend took my mom and my brother. We went to London and Milan for a week, and that was pretty much all on points as well.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
I'm just starting to implement the system. I'm so excited. So
yeah.
Well, look, we'll work towards getting you out of here. So it's been awesome hearing your story from going into professional baseball, getting your bonus, living off virtually nothing, yet still investing that, growing your portfolio, getting into flips, mastering your finances, and now being a traveling connoisseur on points, which is awesome. So it's been fun, and you dropped so much good information here. So thank you.
Cool. Thank you guys for having me.
Of course, Jason, you take care. Thanks again for coming through. We're looking forward to part 2 of this very soon.
Yes, sir.
Until then, everybody have a great night. Get home safe.
Cool.